Welcome back to Terrible at Fishing. This is your host, Michael Ruffino, and we'll be joined by Mr. Ken Sandusky a little bit later, born and raised here in Klamath Falls. But let's go ahead and talk about the fishing report because the weather is starting to change, and the fish, their biological clocks are ticking. Twice a year, lakes go through what's called an inversion, where the water, warm and cold, trade places. And right now, the fish are starting to sense that this is going to be coming up in a few weeks. So, what's happening? Well, the big fish, the bass, are starting to gorge. And they are just swallowing big old giant baits. So if you got yourself a heavy, extra heavy rod, go cast a 6-7 inch bait out there and start catching those personal bests that are out there on the lakes. Because right now is a fantastic time. They're hitting both topwater and upper water column. Give it a shot. Try a big Rapala or a swim bait, glide bait, or something like that. As for the panfish, they're still doing their thing. They're suspended about 5 or 6 feet, and you can just use a little crappie jig and a little bit of power bait or worm on a hook and just go out there and catch to your heart's delight. As for the trout are still fairly deep. I did see a school of trout, good amount of them, at about 20 feet at Lake of the Woods. So they are starting to creep up just a little bit because they were down 30 feet. But you're still going to have to get your bait down there. Use a spoon, use some power bait, a torpedo weight, and make sure that it's free flowing on your line. Give yourself 3 to 5 feet of leader with some power bait on it, and just toss it out there and work that 20 to 35 feet depth, and you'll be catching in your limit of trout in no time. As for all the rivers, right now they're wide open. Go out there and enjoy. The Williamson single hook is the regulation, and catch yourself some beautiful trout out there. This is Michael Ruffino with Terrible at Fishing. Please check out my YouTube channel. And pretty soon I'll be giving away a custom fishing rod to one of my viewers. We'll see you on the backside here with Ken Sandusky. All right, welcome back to Terrible at Fishing with Michael Ruffino and your very own raised in Klamath Falls, Ken Sandusky.
Hello.
Well, this week we're going to talk about fishing equipment. Everywhere from very affordable combos to buying things separately to the different types. Ken's going to help us with fly fishing because I know nothing about fly fishing. I've wanted to try it though. And actually I did try it back in the 80s. My boss got mad at me because I kept losing flies. And he tied them. So one and done, we floated the Yuba River, and it was pretty hard. So I went online and I went into, in town, we have Sportsman's Warehouse. We got Walmart. We got Bimart, and we have it's Bimart, right? And we got rods and Rod Parker's Rod and Gun.
Yes,
and we really don't have that many fishing shops.
Nope.
And to be honest, I mean, whenever I'm in Walmart, which is when I'm forced to go, I always check out their clearance section, see if there's anything I can get for $1. And Bimart is usually where I go for my fishing stuff.
Yeah, me
if
too.
I buy locally. And then Sportsman's Warehouse, they're more hunters. There's one guy there, if you catch him, he knows something about fishing, but they have a okay selection of rods and reels. So beginners, when I was a child, I just used a block of wood. We talked about that. I mean, that's what we did. My very first fishing rod was a pocket fisherman. Remember that? Have you ever heard of that?
I remember the late night commercial for it.
Yes. It was the pocket fisherman. It was about, I don't know, 18 inches unfolded, but it folded up, and inside the handle, it had a little tackle box.
Yeah.
And it was my very first fishing rod. And it was great because we'd walk 8 miles to the beach, and we would go fishing, and it was great because it was just hooked onto my belt. So actually, it could have been, a Shimano. It wouldn't matter. To me, it was the greatest thing I've ever had. Out of all my fishing stuff, the pocket fisherman was the most momentous. And that kind of shows you when you give a child their first fishing rod, even if it's as bad as a pocket fisherman, to them, it's the greatest thing ever. So nowadays, there's so much more available. Although I would not mind going to eBay and finding a pocket fisherman and buying one just to have it on the wall. I just really would be kind of fun to have. But nowadays, you're at Lake of the Woods, you can get one for $25, rod and reel, in the marina. And, it's crazy that pocket fisherman, it lasted years. And I was just a little kid. But nowadays, there's so much available to you. I think the lowest price I found for a rod and reel online was Bi-Mart, $19.
Yep.
Yeah, $19 was at Bi-Mart. And I will put a caveat on these really inexpensive combos. One, they're all spinning. So that's good because spinning rod reels are pretty easy to learn. Open it up, cast it, close it up, done. But they're so cheap. Oh my goodness. It's almost like you bought it off of Temu. I actually have a reel up there because it's a bait caster. It's cost me $8 on Temu. Yeah, it's a Sugi Yugi Young or something like that. I don't know. I can't remember. I can't even say the name. But I can't believe how bad it is. It's like the whole thing shakes and shudders like a well, it shakes and shudders. It's just the most poorly made thing I've ever seen in my life. And sometimes that's what you get for your money. So you got to ask yourself, how often am I going to take my child fishing? Is it just that day? Then the thing Edward at the marina, that'll work. Hopefully the whole day. But more than likely, your son or daughter is going to get hooked. And once they catch their very first
metaphorically
fish,
hooked, right?
Yeah, both ways. They'll probably get hooked both ways. I'm not fishing unless I'm bleeding. And learning how to remove a hook from your flesh is a very important, thing to do. So you got to ask yourself, is my child? Once they catch their first fish, it's going to be the best day of their life.
Yes, sir. And you get what you pay for, and you're already committing to a significant amount of wrangling when it comes to getting kids started fishing, untangling and helping cast and reel and land and whatnot. So, a little bit extra money might go a long way in saving wear and tear on your body and psyche.
Well, absolutely. And you can get nicer stuff for a budget amount of money. Think about Klamath Falls. I had to walk 8 miles to the beach, to my fishing hole, unless the San Ynez River, which ran through Lompoc, was flowing, which was rare because, Southern California, you just have a lot of trouts. But so we would walk down to the river when it was flowing or walk to the beach. around Klamath Falls, you've got so much to fish, at. I mean, think about, I mean, you were born and raised in Klamath Falls, Ken. Could you walk and go fishing?
Yes, sir. Yeah, the Link River
Yep.
at the right time of year. And then, I mean, my grandpa got me hooked on chubs, and that's a year round opportunity at Lake Awana. I'll even go sometimes now just with a worm and a jig and catch some chubs just for the fun of it down there. I
Yep.
I've also heard recently Awana has become a little bit of a catfishing spot. That's kind of word of mouth, but it seems like more and more people are spending time there. I recently, actually just this morning, saw an invitation for a potential project around Lake Awana that is proposing new hiking trails, quite a bit of new lake access, a bunch of habitat work around Lake Awana to prepare for salmon potentially with dam removal, but also just to make it more accommodating and healthy for outdoor activities and make more fish in the lake.
Yep. No, Lake Awana's 3 blocks down the street from me, and then 2 blocks and down the hill is Link River from my house. So it's like, I mean, kids here in Klamath Falls, you have so much. You got Lost River, you got all these little places that you can go, let alone the big stuff that you see with Upper Klamath, and they even have a little fishing dock, over at Moore Park that you can stand on and get your line wet. And so
Putnam's
it's
Point is probably the most popular spot and where the best potential is for good fish. And
where's
that's
that?
not a bad spot for kids. It's really snaggy there. But a bobber and a worm, you have decent chances. Uh, just a lure that you cast and retrieve, as long as you keep it off the bottom, is pretty safe as well. And there's a handicap accessible fishing dock there. And then, of course, when the water's low enough, most people walk out to the island and fish from the kind of the north upriver section of Putnam's Point.
Where is that?
Across from the nature trail, right before you get to Moore Park,
Oh, okay. All right.
right
Yeah,
across from the marina.
there's some really nice. Oh, yes. There's some really nice little areas. I mean, moving here was what was really my last life decision. I was going through a lot of end of life stuff, so I was like, I wanted to retire and die in Klamath Falls, and the that's because it's so beautiful, and I do not have to, I don't know, drive someplace. I can walk down the street, and I've done that several times to Iowana, or they take that short little trail along the link and just find a spot there. And then, fishing in Oregon, and I come from California. Fishing in Oregon's a lot cheaper. One, you don't have to. I mean, it's $44 for a year-round license for an adult, $10 for somebody 12 to 17, and it's free under 12. And so that's how much it costs. In California, it's like $130 or more nowadays, probably, and you have to have a sticker for every single fish you want to catch. I mean, that is stupid. I mean, it's like an old passport, your fishing license in California. So here in Oregon, we got it pretty good. And then, I mean, you go to a lake. A lot of lakes don't charge a fee. A lot of them do, but it's nominal, like $7 or $10 to get into the lake. And there's no boat launch fee. I mean, California, you pay to get in, pay to launch a boat, and if you want a yearly, pass, it's hundreds of dollars. It's nuts.
I hate to keep doing it, but you're not talking about Modoc County, because that
I'm
kind of
not
stuff would
talking
not
about
fly around here.
Central and Southern California. I mean, it's just. I mean,
Come on down to Modoc County, folks. Buy your out-of-state license and pay nothing else. The
it's
great
180
state of
bucks.
J.
It's $180 for a California license, out of state license.
Yeah, it's only like it's a little cheaper for the day license though here than in
Right.
Oregon. Yeah.
But it's crazy expensive. All right, stay tuned to Gold Country Radio, and we'll be right back. And we'll talk very specific details on gear. I always believed, this is what I would advocate. Any state that shares a border with another state should have the same price of fishing. If you want, I mean, look at that. We're 30 minutes, from each other or so. It's just, I used to like to go over to Shasta or Juanita. Juanita is a nice little lake up in the
Yep.
mountains there,
Yep.
over past Doris. And, it's a fun little lake to puddle around in and catch a lot of bass and trout.
Yep.
But I think that any neighboring state that shares a border should have the same fishing licenses. Because what if you live near on the border? You're kind of not out of state. I mean, we go to Doris all the time because of friends. And it was just like, we're not really out of state.
Yep.
It's just down the street. So, all right. So that's for people here in Klamath Falls, born and raised, and me, so grateful that I have such a great accessibility. You can walk, you can ride your bike, you can drive, you can do whatever you want to find a body of water to fish in. So if you buy a nice rod and reel for your child, more than likely, they're not just going to use it once. Because once they hook a fish, they're going to be walking down to the body of water and throwing that line out as much as they possibly can. And there is no better way for a child to spend their childhood than to be outdoors.
And you're setting them up for success moving forward because you always got that to fall back on to divert you from less productive pursuits. And for me, it's just been a touchstone that's weaved itself through the tapestry of my life and just ended up making me a more productive and respectful human being.
Yeah, it does. And you respect the outdoors. I mean, fish. I always find that people that are hunters or fishermen, they respect the outdoors so much more than the recreational person, the person that camps. The person who camps, they will unfortunately leave trash, and they don't clean up their area very well. I know because I worked at Lake of the Woods. We have camp hosts, hundreds of camping spots, kind of know how it works. But to the fishermen, they're the ones who are going to pick up everything. And they're going to scoop up things out of the lake. So getting your child started on fishing, or any of us, even at a later age, it really will build your appreciation for the things around us. So let's go into
more than that too. Life skills like patience and negotiation, and map, orientation, and just all kinds of things that you just won't develop otherwise. Hand-eye coordination, how to be safe in a dangerous situation. I could go on.
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic. I don't know what you call it, sport, hobby. I don't know, lifestyle. It's my lifestyle, obviously.
There you go.
Between my YouTube channel, this, and then and making baits, I mean, it has become my lifestyle, and that's so much fun. So, starting somebody off on fishing, I probably, I don't know, those $15, $25, $30 combo kits. I would probably encourage them to get something more in the $40 or $50, combos. You can get a I think a Daiwa. I think it was a Daiwa that I found online, or you can get an ugly stick with a decent Shakespeare reel, and Shakespeare can make a good reel.
Yep.
But they can make a junk reel too. So,
yep. The ugly stick carbon combos at Sportsman and elsewhere, I found to be real good. I had my nephew with me this weekend for some fishing trips, and he had a bait casting combo and a spinning reel combo, both ugly stick carbons that came as combos from the store, and they work just fine, just as well as the $100 reel I have on my ugly stick carbon.
Yeah, no, you love ugly stick carbons.
Yeah.
I've been shopping for a swim rod, a swim bait rod, and man, they're expensive. And ugly stick doesn't make one. Swim baits are 5 ounces or so, and for a rod to throw something that heavy, one, it's going to wear you out if you don't have the right rod, and then of course rods have to be really, really strong. And so, I looked at because you are such an ugly stick carbon fan. So of course
Yes,
I
sir.
went to ugly stick carbon. See if they had anything heavy enough, extra heavy in action, and they didn't. So I ordered one from a company called iRod. And iRod has a lifetime warranty, and I figured, well, we'll see how it goes. I mean, we'll see what the iRod does. Almost every rod that I have is made by a company called Cajun Rods out of Cleveland, Ohio. They make their own rods, and they make their own blanks, and they do everything by hand. And they're fairly affordable, for $130, $150 for a rod. So that sounds expensive, but for me, since I fish all the time, it's worth the added investment. But for ugly stick carbons, let me look. I have them up here. Rods, carbons. They run about $90, $70, somewhere in there. Yeah, anywhere from 70 to under $100. They have a couple over $100, but other than that, by buying an ugly stick, you have a rod that lasts forever. You really will. It's a really tough rod. I bought this Gary Loomis Edge, and Edge had a lot of advertising, a lot of good stuff said about it. So I ended up ordering one, $300 for this rod. Yeah. Anyway, so last week I reline it, and I noticed that one of my and it's not even a year old, and I noticed one of my inserts on one of my guides is gone. It's not deformed, so I didn't wreck it or anything. It's a perfect circle. Somehow it popped out, and I must have didn't see it. It's probably on my carpet down here someplace. I don't know. When I restrung it, because I can't imagine it but sometimes you just want a good company that makes a good rod, but at an affordable price, and a company that can back up what they make. And Ugly Stick does. It's a good company. Yeah. So you can get an Ugly Stick combo for like $30, with a Shakespeare reel. But if you get a carbon, you're probably looking about just under $100, maybe. What do you think? It sounds about right.
Inflation. When I first started buying the carbons, they were right at 50 for a combo. So
yeah, they're they're a little more now. They got a wonderful crappie rod. Crappie is a panfish. It's a great trout rod too, and it's $69.95 online. And you can pair that up with a very nice reel and a spinning reel and be happy with it. And for under $100, you could get yourself set up with a really high quality rod and reel for the money. Yep. Now I own 3 spinning rods, spinning setups, because I made a conversion a number of years ago to casting, a bait caster. Now, a lot of people look at a bait caster and they don't understand it. Why does a person go from spinning to bait casting? And I will just fill you in a little bit about the advantages of a bait caster. Bait caster is a one-handed operation. You don't need 2 hands. So you don't have to flip open the bail, cast it, close the bail. This is a one-handed operation. And you can adjust the drag on the fly. So where a spinning rod, you got to adjust that screw on the front, not on this. It's got a star wheel right by your hand, and you can just click it, and you can adjust the drag while you're reeling, and that helps you catch more fish. Now, it's a lot lighter too than a spinning reel. The disadvantage is that there's an oxymoron in reels, because a spinning reel doesn't spin. The spool doesn't spin. It stays stationary. It's the pickup that actually spins. And on a bait caster, the spool spins. How weird is that? This should be called a spinning reel. And that makes it very hard to learn with. And I have a great video on Terrible at Fishing, which will teach you. It's like, I don't know, 12 minutes long. Teach you how to use a bait caster. But bait casters are lighter. Once you get the hang of it, it really is very tough to go back. But it runs more money. Bait casters are a good one is $80 for a bait caster. Abu Garcia Max Pro. That's what, people can't see, but that's what I'm holding in my hand. I have another one coming because it's going to go on my extra heavy. Because it is just a great reel for the money, for $80. So that's casting. So I would never tell somebody to start out with a bait caster. Never. If you really want to be challenged, but watch my video and you will see bait casters they can be tricky and very frustrating. You can backlash a spinning reel.
Yeah.
But that's rare. And I can backlash even my $450 Aldebaran, I can backlash that thing. So never believe a company that says no more backlashes, because they're liars.
It really makes a difference how you spool it up. I said this before, but with a spinning reel, you want to lay the spool flat and let the line come off. With a bait casting reel, you want to put the spool on a pencil or something and let it spin as you wind it.
Yeah, it's
makes a huge difference. And it even makes a difference with a spinning reel, which way it's coming off. So if you begin spooling up and you open your bail and that line's jumping off, tighten it back up, start over and flip the spool over on the ground and let it come off the other side. Often it's upside down is the way they spool them in the factory, I find.
Yep.
Not 100% consistent, but you probably want the label side down.
Right. Yeah, you don't, and maybe a good fishing store like Parker's will show you how to spool it, but I have good videos on Terrible at Fishing too. You have to reduce line twist, because if you don't, and that depends on the line. A really heavy fluorocarbon is very high memory. So that thing is like a spring.
Yeah.
I tried soaking it in hot water. I tried a hair dryer. I tried all sorts of stuff to take 30-pound fluorocarbon and reduce its memory. All it's good for is leaders. That's all it's good for. It's not good for putting on, and that's a different subject. Now, fly fishing. Now, you know everything about fly fishing. I know.
I wouldn't go that far.
I looked it up, and Bimart has a fly fishing combo for $45 and Sportsman's Warehouse for $40. And that's what I found, over in those companies. But tell us about fly fishing. What do you need? Because it seems more complicated for fly fishing than it does for spinning or bait casting. All right, stay tuned for the next segment on fly fishing. I learned a lot, and it is something that I'm very interested in giving it a go. So hopefully, stay with us, and maybe you will too.
You could take it that way, but it could also be a lot more simple. So, my grandpa got me started, and looking up on the wall here, a set of 3 bamboo fly rods that he picked up at a yard sale. And what we would do is go to the small creeks and just dangle the fly, and sometimes even bait. I mean, I know that some fly guys or fly people who are a little more diehard would just think that that's sacrilegious, but uh, you know, if you do any small stream fishing, you'll find that the reel sometimes gets in the way. The handle of the reel when you're flipping and pitching or just dangling bait, you pull out a little with your fingers, and you're kind of controlling that extra line rather than casting just by pulling it out with your fingers from the spool. And if you can do that with a fly rod really easily, and the reel handle doesn't get in the way at all. So it could be simple in that stream or other small water situation, even more simple than any other type of gear. But if you're going up in complexity to like spay fishing for anadromous fish, steelhead on the Umpqua or Deschutes. They do a lot of that spay fishing where you're talking about big long rods, expensive reels, and quite a bit of gear to make that happen appropriately. The roll cast, that's just a giant roll cast is what it is with when they're spay fishing. So anywhere in between that, there's plenty of room to land. And we were talking about the Link River earlier. Spent a lot of time with a bamboo fly rod in my hand and a jig head with whatever bait I could catch, dangling that right offshore and catching those chubs out of there. That being said, there's just no reason in my mind to get started with a 4 or 5, $100, $1,000 outfit. You can get a combo at any store that sells fishing gear for 30 $20 $30, and it's not going to launch a bugger out there all the way across the river, but it is going to help you get the timing of the back cast and put that fly where you want it. And that's really the skill set that you're trying to develop when it comes to fly fishing. Around here, you don't even really have to learn the bugs because the word is piscivorous. I think we've talked about that before. Whether regardless of the species around here, they have a propensity to eat minnows, and so a minnow imitation or a leech imitation like a woolly bugger. I like the big hares, rabbit tail streamers, and things like that. Anything that looks like a minnow, they're a little tougher to handle, but it comes with a lot less need to make it look real, right? Because it already does, and minnows have a tendency to move on their own. So your drag, your mending is not as important. But the real technique, from my perspective, when it comes to fly fishing, is that stack mend, trying to get it down deep. And so, from a gear perspective, those heavier like beadhead woolly buggers, especially in the olive color. And if you got a decent leader, it doesn't matter what line you got on or how much you paid for your rod. If you can get that woolly bugger in front of a fish, it's a pretty good chance they're going to bite it.
How hard is it to learn how to fly fish?
How coordinated are you?
Well, I have
it's all about
injury.
timing.
I have a brain injury, but
timing.
I know how to fish. But I remember, when back in the 80s, at one time my boss took me fly fishing. We would, whip that thing back and forth and then toss it out there. And then you talked about roll casting, which is just flipping it forward and getting that thing to flip forward. But, every time I did it, whipped it, I always hit a rock and lost the fly. So it was like, that made my boss mad. And I don't know. It just seems like there's definitely more technique to it. and I can't imagine you doing it on a windy day. But that is there anybody in the area that teaches fly fishing?
Yeah, I mean, you get a guide to take you out, and they'll have the gear for you and get you some techniques. Um, the free fishing days have usually, especially up at the Cricket Creek Hatchery, some component of fly angling. I've done youth fishing events in the past, and always just have a couple of fly rods there for the kids as they wait. And I can't say roll cast enough, because around here, just you don't have to worry about your back cast. It's too much vegetation. So just bring the rod tip slowly up high to 12 o'clock, and just accelerate forward with a
Right,
little bit of risk action, and you're throwing a loop into the line that just
right,
rolls out and goes back to the extent of the line you have, and that's enough to get you started around here. When I was young, I spent a lot of time in my parents' yard casting at bushes and holes in the fence to develop that skill set, to be able to utilize it out on the river. And often that's just not required. It's the drift, the stackman, and the roll cast, and you can sit on a rock, fish the same hole all day, and you just can't do that with other types of gear.
hmm. I know that there are some lakes and parts of rivers that only allow, like Davis Lake is only for fly fishermen.
Yeah, the
And
upper Umpqua, they have a
yeah,
closure on the Rogue like that.
yep,
Yep.
yeah. So um, it is one of those things I'm very interested in. But after I get my quiver together for all my bait casting,
There you
um,
go.
I mean, I'll tell you, once you start bait casting, it is an addiction, but very expensive. It's very expensive. I already mentioned a $450 reel I got for just to cast 1/64 ounce baits out there. The where spinning gear, you could just get away with a medium or a medium light and just be super happy with that thing for almost any lake or river in our area. And that's the beauty about spin gear. Spinning reels are extremely versatile and adaptable, where on bait casting it isn't. And fly fishing, like I said, I can't imagine doing it on a windy day. You'd almost have to have a spinning rod with you if indeed the wind picked up. Um, Unless you're casting it with the wind all the time, just
Well,
throw it up in the air.
there's techniques for that too. So,
I'm sure.
the trick for casting into the wind is to turn around and let your back cast be what falls onto the river.
Yeah,
Very
yeah.
simple technique is just to cast the wrong way.
Put yourself in a different position, I guess.
Well,
But
you
that's
turn around and you cast away from the river, and then
right.
you let your back cast fall to the river. That's the technique for managing wind in your face.
That would be so weird.
I've I've
Is
been
that the
out there.
weirdest thing?
Yeah, it feels weird, but it works. And
I'm sure it
there's
does.
times where the wind is blowing out your back, and you don't even have to cast. You just hold the thing up in the air until the wind blows it out there, then let it fall. So it can work for you too.
Well, something else about fly, and I don't understand it, um, is that you have was it backline on it?
Backing, yeah. Hmm.
Backing. What is backing?
Well, your fly line is only going to be about, and I'll probably get this wrong, but say 30 yards long.
Okay.
And if you hook a big fish, you're going to want more room to run, and so you use a nylon backing line, and you fill up your spool, 3/4 of the way or halfway with that backing. You use a nail knot or some other technique to connect the backing to the fly line. You reel on that fly line, and then you connect in the same way your leader and your tippet. Your fly line, comes in different configurations. I think a floating line is probably going to be the best for beginners. but they have sink tip, sinking at different rates. There's a shooting head that helps with casting and casting in the wind and things like that. But, a double taper so you can flip it over and use the other end at some point. So, if one end gets worn out, you can just flip it over and use the other end of thing. But either way, getting started, if you buy a combo, it's probably going to come with a high visibility floating line, and that's great to get started. You can always work to get the fly down in the water column with added weight or a bead head of some sort. Uh, but one thing you should consider is a tapered leader with a little bit of tippet at the end. That way you're not constantly shortening your leader until you're fishing with 30-pound tests at the end of your line.
Yeah, my boss had 2-pound tippet while we were fishing. 2 pounds.
Yeah, that's a little light for me and for the red bands around here. I think you can get away with 6 or 8 pound just fine.
Yeah, we were steelhead fishing.
Yeah, they're spooky.
And, yeah, boy, it's man, it was hard. I mean, it was pretty though. So once you kind of, I would tell people, sort of save up a little bit, and save up a little bit, buy something a little bit better. You never regret it. If you got to mow a couple more lawns as a kid, go mow a couple more lawns. I mean, I don't know if kids do that anymore. I'll tell you, I mean, I have no lawn, but I mean, if I would definitely hire a kid if they knocked on my door to do something, because I got a basement that needs to be cleaned up. But I would tell them to do something like that, to get something nice. And if it's a parent wanting to start their kid out, do something a little, you don't have to spend a lot of money, $50 to $100 will buy a really nice setup of varying degrees. But if you go to half of 50, 25, I really don't. Yeah, that's a day use, in my opinion. And if it lasts 2 days, good for you. But I would definitely do something in that budget. As for tackle boxes, now you told me. Now see, I got a tackle bag back here that holds 17 3700 boxes. I mean,
Wow.
Plano boxes 3700 size, the biggest. It can hold 17 of them. Yeah, it's right here. But you, Mr. I like spoons. You go out there with one little tackle box, don't you?
I was going to say about fly fishing, one of my favorite things is you got a rod, a reel, and a one little box if you want to get away with it. And there's no reason why that can't be what you do with a spinning outfit too. And yeah, I got a little orange box that, is empty most of the time. And when I leave the truck, I pack it full of a handful of lures that I think I am going to need for wherever I'm headed that day. And that's what I carry with me. One or two little boxes with the lures that I think are going to work. And there's just no reason in my mind. And I'm often on foot, fishing shoreline or getting into some backcountry, heading down the river into the canyon or whatever. And if you take your box with you, you're liable to leave it behind. I went through a long stage where I would carry all that tackle in a backpack tackle box, and the bottom had a cooler on it. I thought it was just the coolest thing ever, and I'd have my drinks in there with some ice. And one day I just decided to weigh myself with that thing on, and it was like 35 extra pounds. And I would find that I'd be down there with 2 or 3 lures all day long. So I still often will carry a backpack, a much lighter one that I can strap my catch and release net to. That's really important. I think when we're talking about gear and we'll probably get into rubberized catch and release nets, but a light backpack with some external pockets and some straps comes in really handy. But what's in there? A coat, a pillow in case I decide to take a nap, a headlamp so I can get out in the dark, some water, and that one little box that I can carry in my front pocket if I want to.
All right, stay tuned and come back after the commercial break, and let's finish our discussion on necessary equipment and how to get people started, and some really good cost-saving tips, including maybe even start fishing for free. I have too much, but then again, that's bass
Yeah,
fishing.
you're not the only.
That when you pick your species to fish for, it really does make a big difference in the amount of tackle that you have. When it comes to, like you said, fly fishing, simple, probably the simplest is fly fishing, and you can even start a hobby of tying your own flies, which I have great admiration for those people who tie their own flies. I have somebody I traded baits with, and he sent me all these flies that he tied and stuff, and I sent him my baits, and so I'm ready to start fly fishing. I just need to buy the gear. I got flies though. The spinning stuff, I mean, if you go trout are pretty stupid. They pretty much hit the same thing over and over again. But bass, if you go after bass, you have a big warning from me. Big warning. You're going to buy lots of rods, and you're going to buy a lot of baits, or start making your own baits like me. I mean, I make my own baits, and I hand paint them. I clear coat them. I mold them. I inject them. I do everything I can to make my own baits, because I'd spend $1,000 a year just on baits. Just on baits, I'd spend $1,000 a year, and it just got a little out of hand. So I started making my own, and it makes all the difference. And now I do it for other people too, so it helps pay for these rods that I keep getting. But that is kind of when you pick a species, you're going to pretty much pick, the tackle. I like Plano boxes or those styles, because I can put different stuff in each one. I can have a topwater box. I can have a shallow diving box. I can have a finesse box. And then I have tried it. Just take my favorite baits in one box out on the lake, and I felt naked. I just felt like I'm missing something. And then I always think, oh, I should have brought that one.
Yeah.
I'm still catching though. That's so crazy. I'm still catching. But like the other day, I was going topwater and it wasn't biting. 2 days earlier, I was catching 50. And then that day I had to go deep. And then I'd go, or not deep, but shallow dive. And then I had to go with not a bright one, which you usually do in clear water, you go bright colors. In dark water, you go dark colors. I know it's weird, but that's the way it works in bass fishing.
Yep.
But when I went to black baits, it worked, and I was in clear water. But I made spoons. I'm going to try a spoon.
They'll bite it on the drop. That's what I know.
I'm going to try spoon. Now, fishing line. There's so much. I mean, typically, if you buy a pre-rigged stuff, it's going to have, especially spinning reels, it's going to have monofilament on it. It's the cheapest line on the market, and it stretches. So it is monofilament's the lowest priced line on the market. It's fairly invisible in the water, but because it does stretch, the fish can spit out your hook. So I don't use monofilament at all. And it is affordable. I've got a 500-foot spool around here someplace of it, but 500 yards. And but it's just there. My favorite line is fluorocarbon. That's my favorite. But like I mentioned earlier, if you get a heavy pound fluorocarbon, it's like spooling a spring onto your reel. It's just not worth it.
It responds really well to stretch. If you got fluorocarbon and it's springy on your line, hook it to a telephone pole and walk down the block and pull on it as you reel it back in, and that'll take some of that memory out of there.
Maybe on a hot day, maybe that would loosen it up a little bit.
You gotta really stretch it out. You gotta talk to the line a little bit as you reel it back in. keep it under tension as you reel it back up, and that'll undo a lot of that memory, especially in mono, but also especially in fluorocarbon.
Yeah, fluoro is very, very. It has no stretch to it. It holds a very good knot, and it is completely fluorocarbon is completely invisible in the water. It has the same refractive qualities as water does. So when the fluorocarbon sinks down into the water, there's no visibility to it. That's why
Yep.
most fishermen will use fluorocarbon as a leader. And a
Yep.
leader is what you attach that it's an extension of your fishing line onto the bait. And even in the ocean, people will use a 100 or 200 pound fluorocarbon leader in order to attach to their line to their bait. You just want to be able to make the fish not see your line. And that's really important. So that's, if I was to tell somebody, especially trout fishing, just go fluorocarbon all the time. Go 6 pound fluorocarbon and just have fun. And yeah, please reel it in, spool it properly, or else it's just going to spring out on you and it'll drive you nuts. And then there's braid. Now, braid is probably the coolest of the lines because you can cast it the farthest. It's the smallest diameter. It's very strong. It holds a very good knot. It has no stretching. And that thing, that'll cast forever. But with braid, typically, you're going to put a leader on it. Typically. Unless, my frogging rod, I don't do that. I have a frogging rod because the line never goes into the water. I'm just walking the frog on top of the lily pads. And the line never goes in the water. So it's the only rod I have without a leader. So if you can find, you can get some good deals on fluorocarbon, and there's pure fluorocarbon and there's fluorocoat, which is monofilament with a coating of fluoro on it.
Yeah. That's what I was going to boil it down. Again, keep it simple, stupid. So go to Big Five, which we left off the list earlier.
Oh, we did.
Go to Big Five, and buy the big spool. It's called Izerline Platinum, and it's a fluorocarbon coated monofilament. Has very low memory, good stretch, great lack of visibility to fish underwater. It's cheap and it comes on big spools. It holds up to the sun well. And the only place I've ever found that is that Big Five. They tend to carry it everywhere, but usually in a little bit heavier pound tests than what we need around here. So every time I go in there, I say, can you please get the 8 pound test of the Izerline? And sometimes they have it and sometimes they don't. But when they do, and you buy 2,200 yards of that stuff, it's going to last a while.
Yeah. Well, the problem about that much yards is that fishing line does age.
Yeah, this stuff holds up really well. I do like to keep it in the closet out of the sun and elements just to maximize that. But I've had that stuff on the shelf for 3-4 years at a time, and it all seems to me to hold up pretty well. If you keep it on the windowsill or in the dashboard of your truck, it's probably not going to hold up quite as well. But
that's why I don't buy fishing line at garage sales. Yeah. So I mean, you don't know.
That's right. Yeah,
you don't know.
Don't use old line.
No.
Respool often. Yeah, that's some foundational advice right there.
Yep. I love garage sales and estate sales. I'll tell you, I there was a guy selling a whole bunch of fishing line here last week, or fishing stuff, and he had some really cool vintage reels. And I like vintage reels and vintage baits and stuff like that, just for collecting it, but and then restoring it. I got one Shimano up there. It's hundreds of dollars, but it lacks one part. I don't like that part anymore. But I would tell you, if again, I go to fishing, go to garage sales.
Yeah.
I mean, a garage sale, fishing stuff will sell out fastest. So you got to get to a garage sale first day, first hour in order to have a pick of fishing stuff. It is the fastest seller at a garage sale. and a fisherman will go there and he'll just grab every rod. Go to thrift stores.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can find a good rod, in a bin at a thrift store. You don't have to buy new. I mean, you just don't. Just make sure that it looks good, and all the inserts are in the guides, and and feel it. And then make sure it's the right action for you. A lot of people, you'll find extra heavy stuff in a garage sale, or really light stuff, and you want something that you can fish with and catch stuff with.
Yeah.
But those are great places. I love garage sales. Swap meets. Go to a swap meet. Do we have
There you
swap
go.
meets around here? I know there's a little one over on I forgot the name of the street. It's over off of Main or 6th Street there. But we don't have too many swap meets around here, do we?
Once or twice a year at the fairgrounds, they'll have stuff like that.
That's true. And I went to the sportsman show earlier this year at the fairgrounds, and there was a couple booths that were selling, some used equipment. And of course I looked. I didn't buy anything from them, but I would suggest doing something like that, or asking friends. You know how many friends actually have stuff in their garage, stuff I don't use, or they don't use, that they would be happy to set, a young person up fishing. I mean,
I hold on to.
Sometimes you don't even have to spend money.
Yep. I hold on to rods that I happen across, or that people get me, that I have no intention of using, just in case someone comes along who needs one. And I've given away dozens of outfits over the years of old stuff, or stuff I just happened across that I just couldn't throw away. And I keep it around for spare parts too, and resurrect old rods that I no longer need, but keep them there in case somebody does.
Absolutely. I mean, you imagine a kid going door to door, and with their parents, of course, nowadays. But when I was a kid, we just had a lawnmower. We went door to door, and we'll mow your lawn for fishing equipment. I'm good.
Yep.
Or do chores for fishing equipment. I mean, to be honest, there are some really creative ways, and what a wonderful, refreshing thing to have, a parent with their child at my door that's willing to work to get what they want, especially something as cool as fishing. I mean, if they came and says, we'll mow your lawn for an Xbox, well, that ain't gonna happen. But but what a great thing. I mean, we were creative when I was younger. We couldn't afford anything. I mean, we were always being evicted from our home. We moved all the time. But Mom did her best, raising us, and we had to get creative to do what we wanted to do, play outside. Yeah. And so we did. We collected bottles, cans, whatever.
You don't need fancy gear to get into fishing either. I've told the story before about just wrapping line around my hand with a hook.
Yep.
No bait, nothing. Ride the bicycle down to the link, catch our own bait, and just dangle that off the shore. And we caught many fish, or tie it to our own stick, or whatever it looks like. And we went fishing many times without rods at all when we were kids.
And
you just can't get out and ride your bike like you could back then by yourself all day long, every day.
I know.
That's kind of a sad state of the world.
It is a sad state of the world, because, I mean, we walked 8 miles to the beach. I mean, we were kids. When it comes to fishing, you don't have to spend any money. You can just, I'm a fisherman out on the lake, and, I give baits away constantly to children out on the lake. And, if somebody wanted something, I will help them find a way to do it. On my YouTube channel right now, I think I told you right before we started recording, I'm about to hit 2,000 subscribers. So I would tell everybody listening, go to my YouTube channel, subscribe, and then as I hit 2,000, which will probably be in about a month, I'm going to give away to somebody a custom American made rod. I mean, it's an expensive rod. It's going to be really, really nice for anybody who gets it. You know, Ken and I always tell you, what do we always tell people about their fishing spots?
Clean them up. Leave them better than you found it.
Leave them better than you found it. You bet. And tight lines, everybody.